listening to Evergreen Media Network. I am Cindy Schwartz, and this is the Patient Partner Show, and we are on Spreaker as a podcast as well. Jeannie Roller has got a topic today. Jeannie, let's start talking with that, and I'll try to form in my opinion as well, because this is another humdinger, if you will, for abuse in the medical setting. I don't know how many more stories we can listen to about this stuff, but there's a lot of them. I mean, there just is so many of them. It's really sad and very disturbing about this. So go ahead.
Okay, well, this is called Men Too, Sexual Harassment in the Operating Room. It's a fictional account. It's about a female nurse who makes remarks about a medical student's physical appearance, and this medical student is a male. And, it's about no one in the operating room spoke up to say, this is not appropriate talk. The anesthesiologist that the student was with said nothing. And then the nurse touched the student, his muscles, and said, you have big ones. How do you get a seatbelt on? And it just kept getting worse and worse. And no one spoke up. And the writer goes on to say that, it's easy to forget that males can be victims of sexual misconduct, harassment. And, it goes on to talk about how women face gender bias, but also men face, in my opinion, gender bias. But she says that men are hurt by expectations of them showing no emotion, that the belief that females in the same situation, the attention should be thought of as being flattering, and that women cannot be the actual person doing the harassment. It's just, it reminds me a lot of what happened to my husband. People really didn't think that he could have been a victim of sexual abuse, because it doesn't happen to male patients. Females, nurses, do not sexually harass, which is totally not true. The thing that struck me about this is that she was talking about the medical student and being sexually harassed, but she didn't address to me the big elephant in the room, and that is patients also suffer this, and many times they're sedated, so they don't actually know that they're suffering the sexual abuse from a medical person in the procedure, especially when they're doing the draping and such. When basically you're naked, they will make comments about certain body features. That is also sexual harassment, but yet there's not very much talk that I have read about that. And I think that, people need to be aware that this type of thing happens. It not only can happen from peer to peer, but also from the medical provider to the patient. So I also believe that people need to realize that, yes, women do sexually harass. So sexual abuse can happen to either a female or a male patient. Mm-hmm. We often read about it happening to female patients, but rarely do we read about it happening to a male patient.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, too, is how do I explain this? So the bias is that, I don't want to say ordinarily, but the bias is on the female person being sexually abused more prevalently than the male person. But I think that it's not taken into account the feelings. Male feelings are different than female feelings that females have. So you just wrongly assume that because the guy isn't like, kind of thing, that there's nothing wrong. that they're just like kind of going along with it, that they're just like smoothing it over. It's no big deal. I'm a guy, blah, 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 tough guy and whatever, blah, 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 blah. And it's wrong. It's inaccurate. I mean, I have 2 brothers and, many males in my family or whatever, and I can tell you right now that it probably wouldn't bother my older brother as much as it would my younger brother. I know something like that would absolutely devastate him. The older brother would kind of schlep it off because I just know them both so well, growing up with them my whole life, and I'm just using them for example because I do know them so well. So, there's your answer right there. I mean, there's 2 people that I'm related to in totally different dynamics of what it is, and that guys absolutely are that sensitive and need to have just as much respect in any medical setting, especially in an intimate medical setting, absolutely. And to assume anything is always wrong.
Yeah. Well, it also is thought that men remain more silent about it because it's more shameful for a man to admit that they have been sexually harassed, abused, than it is for a female. We've been taught to speak up and out if it happens to us.
I kind of agree and I disagree.
Men aren't.
Well, I kind of agree and I disagree with it, Jeannie, because how many stories have you ever heard about women, young girls, females that are raped and we're too ashamed to tell? I mean, we all know that the percentage of ones that have actually stories have been told is a low percentage. So I kind of agree with you, and I don't. Well, there's a lot of females. I'm going to say yes, that I do agree that maybe society-wise it is talked about more, sadly, because there's so many incidences of it. But, it shouldn't happen at all. I don't care who it is. It shouldn't happen to anybody at all. Why it does, it just makes me sick. Absolutely. There's no excuse for any of it. None.
But the glaring point to me was that in medical settings, they remain quiet.
Yeah.
And I think that pretty much, if it happens to a colleague, they're quiet, they remain silent. If it happens to a patient, they will remain quiet, silent. Yeah. So, I mean, that should not be happening.
Yeah.
If it happens, you have to speak up and out.
Right. My opinion on that, it's always management. It's, however, it's in my opinion, any job that you have, any manufacturing, restaurant, whatever job, any office that you work in, it's always management that needs to set the precedent. And if management doesn't, a lot of that's poor management it is, or the people just think that they either can get away with it. Again, all my opinions, they can get away with it because they're not going to be held accountable. There's a lot of egos involved with it. I mean, certainly in some of the incidences we talk with, it's, they let the doctor or whatever do what they wanted because they're bringing in big money. There you go with that aspect with the money again. But it's management. If somebody sets the precedent in that arena, that OR, that procedure room or whatever, then the other people will fall in line. But somebody has to set that precedent. Right. They have to. It falls back on that, to what is the management of that particular arena, and what are we going to let go and what are we not going to let go, and what are the rules. And you need to follow them and be held accountable. Totally, absolutely held accountable. So anyway, that's my opinion on that. We have like a minute left if you want to wrap it up on that, Jeannie. It's sad. I don't want to hear about any of it. I don't.
Well, yeah, I know. And, you have to wonder how often this happens, because I would say it happens quite a bit. And I do think that, when you have groups of people, like you say, like in an operating room, and they are together all the time, then it becomes commonplace, and someone just coming in may not feel like they have the power to say anything.
Well, that's true. Again, it goes back to what the management is. I don't care how long, if somebody's been in that situation, as the lead, if you will, they set the precedent. They do. They hold the accountability for the people. I don't care who it is. If you've had the job for 6 months, there's always a leader. You know that. There's always a leader. There are people that are just born leaders. There are people just natural leaders, whatever, and those people can sway it either good or bad. So, I mean, that's my opinion, and I think administration needs to, really tie into all of that, to know who your good leaders are and get rid of the ones that aren't. On that note, stay listening to Evergreen Media Network.